Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. We're going to be talking about a lot of different topics, but I thought I would start off with a story written by Julie Marie Blake. She says, imagine dropping your daughter off for her first year of college. Thanks to her acceptance into a Christian college, you're comfortable as you could be in launching this young woman into the real world. And then talks about bagging up all the belongings and driving off to the college. And then after several attempts at delaying the inevitable, you allow yourself one last tour of her new digs. Doesn't nearly take very long, since the room is roughly the size of a parking space. All that's left, holding back tears as you hug her goodbye, then counting the days until Christmas break. Then you learn that her roommate is a male. What? This has to do with a case that has just come out, which involves, first of all, the College of the Ozarks in Missouri. Now, I know that college because I've spoken there. I've done chapel services a couple of times there, various convocations. And it's a lawsuit being brought by Alliance Defending Freedom, challenging the Biden administration. Now, what did they do? How in the world, as this article says, that it is now trying to force Christian schools to violate their deeply held beliefs, biblical beliefs on sexuality? Well, it turns out that you can look at the Fair Housing Act, which has been around for more than 50 years, half a century. Everybody knew how it was to be interpreted. My father, when he was actually running for the California Assembly, actually was involved in a very tangential way about that as well. And we always knew that it was implemented so that you would not ban people on the base of race, because sometimes that would be the case. But an executive order signed by President Biden now says we're going to change that from just looking at inherent characteristics like race and sex to also adding on sexual orientation, gender identity, and a number of others into this area of sex education. And so this is why, indeed, a College of the Ozarks have said we've got to deal with this pretty quickly, because otherwise they really only have one of three choices. First choice is to abandon their religious belief and comply. Can't do that. The second is to refuse to do what the Biden administration now is trying to force them to do, which would result in massive fines in the six-figure range, maybe even attorney's fees, punitive damages, the list goes on and on. Or they could just simply stop offering housing to their students. And yet, if you know anything about Christian colleges and Christian universities, there is a tremendous benefit of having students living on campus, especially in this case, because if you're not familiar with College of the Ozarks, it's called Hard Work U. In other words, they don't charge tuition. Each one of the students has a job on campus in order to, if you will, pay for tuition. So this was brought to the district court. They didn't seem any interested. So now, fortunately, the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals has granted an opportunity to expedite the argument. And this is a case being brought by Alliance Defending Freedom. Now, some of you might say, well, is there a good chance that they would win? Yes, there's a very good chance that we'll win. Even tomorrow, we're going to have some people with First Liberty that have won almost 90% of their cases. This one, again, makes the case that private faith-based colleges have a constitutionally protected freedom so that they don't have to put men and women in dorms, in showers, and locker rooms. And as a matter of fact, we have the legislative history. We also have a Supreme Court precedent. And if nothing else, this is why you should be grateful for things like Point of View, that, again, First Liberty, run by Kelly Shackelford, who used to listen to Point of View and came up with the idea to do religious liberty. Alliance Defending Freedom, headed up by Michael Ferris, again, a very good friend of this ministry. And Alliance Defending Freedom actually put together by Marlon Maddox and D. James Kennedy and Jim Dobson and Larry Burkett and all sorts of other, Don Wildman, a good example of this. And so once again, we wanted you to know about this case, to pray about it, but also to recognize that indirectly, the kinds of things we've been doing here on Point of View will have an impact on what eventually will be a case ruling in favor of Christians. This week, we of course have Unchanging Truth, a topic during our Truth Team Week, and in studio with me, Brad Fisk.
Hey, how you doing?
Well, I was a little disturbed to say if they don't win this case, then all of a sudden you got to put boys and girls in Christian dorms. No. Can you believe this
No,
stuff?
I can't. I mean, the audaciousness of the other side at times, it just boggles my mind. But you know what? I'm excited because it's Truth Team Week, and we are excited to ask you to join with us financially at any level, monthly gift, a single gift. We're especially encouraging you to go to pointofview.net, and you can look at the free gifts. We have some thank you gifts.
Yes, you do.
For those who join at certain levels, the Truth Team. And so here's the number if you want to give us a call, 800-347-5151. You can also, as I said, go on the website at pointofview.net. You can give there as well. Now, as sometimes happens every once in a while, some donors get together and they say, you know what, we want to do something kind of exciting. We want to set up a match challenge for your listeners. But here's the deal. You don't get the money until it's matched. So it has to be matched by another gift. That's where you come in, my friend, and you and you. So give us a call. It's a $2,000 match, dollar for dollar, which means if you give a gift of $50 a month, it becomes $100 a month, just like that. 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or pointofview.net.
So got a match on the table. We haven't had that. And again, we certainly do need to hear from you. Giving has been very significantly down. We'll probably talk with Warren Kelly a little bit later this hour to give you an update on that. But if you find yourself saying, well, what actually happens when you do Point of View? Well, first of all, just look at the individuals we just mentioned a minute ago that are actually involved in fighting for the rights of Christian colleges, in this case, also Christian schools. And of course, if you don't change this, it could be fighting for the rights of churches and things of this nature.
It could go
camps,
anywhere.
Anywhere this goes. And these are individuals that have been in the past influenced by Point of View. And so that's certainly one of the benefits. The other benefit to you, I suspect you just heard about this for the first time. Now, you can turn on the TV tonight and see if anybody else is talking about this lawsuit, but I got this funny idea that maybe the first you've heard about it is right here. We are listener supported, and we certainly do need your financial support, and we have certainly been encouraging you this week to be involved with us. The theme, of course, is God's unchanging truth in a changing world and culture. And in just a few minutes, we're going to be talking with Michael Perron, who'll be in studio with us, because we want to also encourage you to consider what you can do to reach out to people that are dealing with various kinds of addiction, mental problems, and the rest. What is happening with churches and others, and we're really going to again, provide some positive solutions to some of the issues that have surfaced and some of the things we talk about here on Point of View. But first of all, Brad, we have a match on the table, and we certainly want individuals to make that phone call.
We do. $2,000 match challenge is on the table. 800-347-5151. There's room for you right now. 800-347-5151. And you can also give online at pointofview.net and figure out the thank you gifts. They're really cool.
And again, we have people waiting for your phone call, including my daughter and my wife, along with some of the staff here. So you never know who you might get when you dial that number, 800-347-5151. At any time, you can go to the website, pointofview.net. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Each day we use some form of money, but rarely we think about the key attributes of money that make it work in our daily financial transactions. In my booklet on a biblical view of money, I explain that scarcity is one of the most important aspects of money as a medium of exchange. We can see this by looking at other forms of money used in the past. Money originally took the form of stones, beads, and shells. Cattle and agricultural produce might have been seen as forms of money, but they would only work on a barter system and could not be divided or stored the way money can be used. The ray stones in Yap Island were large circular stones carved from limestone. They were brought from the neighboring island and difficult to procure. That changed when David O'Keefe was shipwrecked on the island. He realized that he could go to another island and using modern tools and transportation could increase the supply of the stones. This ultimately led to the demise of these stones as money. In Western Africa, special beads were used as money for centuries. They were precious because glass-making technology was expensive and not very common. Their limited supply made the beads sound money until European explorers visited the region. Once they began to import vast quantities of glass beads from Europe, the value of this form of money collapsed. Seashells were another form of money around the world. They also suffered the same fate when advanced technology and boats flooded the market. There's a lesson here for us today. The money supply in America has been increased by more than a third in just the last year or two. The dollars in your wallet or purse are worth less than a year ago and will be worth even less in the future. This is the unfortunate lesson of the history of money. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Critical Race Theory, go to viewpoints.info/CRT. Point of View Truth Team, unchanging truth in a changing world.
Hello, Point of View listener. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. Point of View Radio is so important to the Christian community in our country. Kerby Anderson's been a personal friend of mine for a long time. He's one of the best, very best in Christian broadcasting. And Marlon Maddox, the founder of Point of View, was a great friend of my dad's, Don Wildman. So our ties go way back. But Point of View is still aired here on American Family Radio, and we're proud to bring it to our listeners. Kerby and the team do a great job of giving a biblical worldview analysis of current events and issues that are in the news that we need to know about so we can be informed, engaged, and make a difference in our culture. So God bless Kerby Anderson and the whole team at Point of View.
Tim Wildman, and I was just with him in Tupelo, Mississippi. He and his wife fed us entirely too much, but we enjoyed our time there, and that partnership we have with American Family Radio goes back many years, and so we certainly do want you to remember we're listener-supported, and we have a match on the table, but I wanted to move immediately into some conversation about the whole issue of mental health and addictions, those kinds of issues. We've addressed some of that in the past. We've had John Townsend and Henry Cloud and June Hunt and Stephen Arterburn, but one of our kind of go-to people now is Michael Perron, who's in studio with us. He is an individual who's been sober for more than 2 decades, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, but he is the pastor of Life Recovery at Prestonwood Baptist Church, also working with the Department of Health and Human Services to try to create a framework for faith-based organizations to address these issues. So, Michael, it is great to have you on the program.
Glad to be back with you, as always.
You know, when I think about this, we've done booklets on drug abuse, and you certainly know know all about that. More recently, we did a little booklet on loneliness and that issue, and of course, abuse and domestic violence. I just finished up, and some of our other staff finished up, an issue that we have in November on suicide and the suicide epidemic. And so we're recognizing that this is another feature that we're trying to develop here at Point of View. And you have been really thinking about, because you're the pastor of Life Recovery, what churches can do to really reach out to individuals that have mental problems. They're having addiction problems. Sometimes the pastor can't answer all the questions, but you want them to know how to refer. And this is, I think, a big issue, not only for us at Point of View, but for churches around the country, don't you think?
It is. 2020 has been termed the deadliest year in American history, in modern American history. And a result of that is obviously, the pandemic that took place, the loneliness that you addressed, the intensifying of drug addiction across the board. And they're calling it a disease of despair, or death by despair.
Yeah.
Because we have individuals who have been separated from families, separated from others, and they find themselves in a position where they don't know what to do and they don't know where to go. Studies have shown that a majority of people, well over 70% of people, the first person they go to in their moment of despair is a pastor, or somebody of clergy, I should say. But so often studies have indicated that even pastors and ministers, 47% say that they're equipped to answer any of those questions, meaning that 53% of even our pastors in the churches today, they feel ill-equipped to answer those questions on mental health and problems like that.
And you've done this River Conference, which, again, I know we'll be doing other ones in the future. And one of the people that spoke is Daniel Amen, Dr. Daniel Amen. And more recently, we actually did this book, The Suicide Solution, which Daniel Amina, actually, it works in the Amen Clinic. And this is another material resource that is available, because I really have to believe that even since this conference was done and you were able to educate people not only in the congregation, because I was there, but also online, we probably saved lives of individuals that said, I am starting to understand what the warning signs are for suicide, and I took preemptive action. So there's really a great deal of hope in this, isn't there?
Absolutely. And that's one of the emphasis that we have in the Life Recovery Ministry. My job is to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. And so my goal is to train and equip individuals in our congregation to, as you said, begin to recognize the initial signs of somebody who may be demonstrating self-harm or suicide ideation. From there, we have the tools and the training and the relationship with, for instance, a professional counselor to build that relationship and allow people the opportunity to go and get the help that they need.
Do you think we're turning the corner? Because there was a time, especially for the older generation, maybe not the baby boomers and the Gen Y and Gen Z, but the older generation say, I am just going to stuff it. I'm not going to tell anybody about that. Maybe even the sense that it would be shameful for me to even admit to my pastor that I'm having some of these thoughts.
Yes, I agree 100%. The younger generation is coming up, and unfortunately, it's almost taken a turn a little bit too far, in my opinion, that if somebody's sad or somebody is going through a difficult time, all of a sudden they're depressed or they have anxiety and they need medication. That's where we rely on the professionals. Nevertheless, churches need to be prepared. We as individual Christians and the body of Christ, the bride of Christ, need to be prepared to give people an answer to remove the stigma that surrounds this mental health issue.
Michael Perron in studio, Brad Fisk. And Brad, in some respects, I see this as very hopeful, because there was a time when the church said, I'm just going to turn a blind eye to these issues. I'm not going to talk about those. We are doing more training in seminaries than ever before to help pastors understand what's going on. So that's really good news, and it's one of the reasons why we want to talk about this more here on Point of View.
It is, and I've been around families that had suicides in their family, because a lot of times you don't hear about the outside ring, and then the next ring out, and then the relatives, and they all get sucked into this thing, and it's so destructive. And God bless you for the ministry, and yes, I think it does need to expand. So we have a $2,000 match real quick on the table, dollar for dollar match. Let's hear from some listeners.
Point of View Truth Team.
Going through the stations and caught Kerby and a very interesting topic. So just listening to it, and so just by hearing the topic, I can relate to some of those topics. But it has impacted my life a lot. I enjoy listening to the station.
It has been about 25 years since God providentially led me to Point of View when I did not even know it existed. During this time, I have shared numerous taped programs with my family and incorporated the Outlook magazine and other articles into the homeschool curriculum I used in teaching our 5 children. Back 25 years ago, I had to put a big box radio with a recorder strategically in a corner so that I could hear that message. Point of View receives no government funding, for which I am grateful. It is therefore my honor, privilege, and responsibility to support this organization of tremendous self-sacrificing people on a monthly financial basis and to put courage into them through letters and specific prayers as they have become like family to me.
Point of View Truth Team.
Back once again, Michael Perron in studio. And Michael, first of all, we have a link to prestonwood.org and Life Recovery because I wanted people to know what you were doing, but we've also posted something we put up there in the past where you actually were being interviewed on the role of churches in treating mental health and addiction. And, you know, we've been talking about hope. You're a perfect example of hope because you have actually been able to be sober for such a long period of time, and your testimony is incredible. And I think in some respects people say, well, is there any light at the end of the tunnel? Yes, you're a good example of that.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, 22 years ago, I received the help that I needed, but it required me to reach out for help and to ask somebody for that particular help. All I knew was that I had a problem. I didn't know where to go or who to talk to. And that's one of the reasons, Kerby, why I want to really encourage your listeners right now to really consider this talk show doesn't shy away from those issues. And it allows people an opportunity like myself who would just happen to be scrolling through a radio station maybe, and all of a sudden I hear a message in which that's my story. Point of View does that. It doesn't shy away, and it allows people the opportunity, as I mentioned before, to reach out and maybe be that first step in the road to recovery. And so that's why I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the energy that you put into this radio station.
Brad, I get the feeling that even people right now listening say, you mean there's an answer? There's somebody that was a meth addict that actually is sober for more than 2 decades? What an incredible story. So that's one of the reasons why we bring these stories every day on Point of View.
It is, and we won't be able to continue to bring these stories, and we have to be fully funded to do what we do. And right now there's a $2,000 match challenge on the table. Every dollar you give will be doubled up to that $2,000 level, and $50 a month. Think about that. It becomes $100 a month during this challenge. Thank you for calling and giving 800-347-5151. I'll say it slow, 800-347-5151. You can always go to the website at pointofview.net.
Let me just mention, as you go to pointofview.net, you can click on that button that says Join Now. Some of you might say, well, are there any benefits to joining at various levels? Yes, we have some thank you gifts. I know you don't give to get, but there are booklets. There's the magazine. At that $50 a month level, there are either a messenger bag or a leather laptop bag. So lots of great resources. So give us a call either at 800-347-5151 or at any time you can go to pointofview.net. We have a match on the table. We need to hear from you. We'll be back with Michael Perron right after this.
These days, it's hard to keep up with what we're allowed to say. No matter where you turn, someone is getting canceled for saying the wrong thing. Where did this cancel culture come from? Our society stepped away from God's truth, and that's why every day people try to cobble together some new moral code to live by. Because these moral codes that we invent change all the time, it's a lot to keep up with. Thankfully, we don't have to worry about what might be considered moral tomorrow because we know that God's moral code does not change. Imagine how much peace our society could experience if people stopped trying to invent new moral codes and simply trusted the author of truth. You can help make that a reality by supporting Point of View, where we always point listeners to God's unchanging truth. When you join our truth team, you provide practical resources to equip listeners to help them live out God's truth in their daily life. Join today at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net. and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Don't forget, we are listener supported, and we have a match on the table. Hopefully get that all cleared up, because who knows, there might be another one coming in the next hour.
Don't know, but we got to get the first 2,000 in the door.
I would think so. Michael Perron with us a little bit longer, and of course we've been talking about everything from addiction to mental health issues. And first of all, you are at Prestonwood Baptist Church, which is in Texas, and you're the pastor of Life Recovery. And so right now people think, well, you've got enough to do with the issues of addiction and all sorts of issues of mental health, but we also right now are not allowing abortions to take place after the 6th week. And for what I've been hearing is that has caused a lot more people to show up at pregnancy resource centers, but you're now going to do an outreach to really begin to emphasize and bolster the issue of adoption. Is that true?
That is true. This is a personal story to us. So our youngest is a gift.
Yes.
And we happen to adopt her. But she came from an environment in which there was addiction and there were mental health problems taking place. The mom got pregnant and obviously chose to be brave and keep the child. And then over the course of time, we built a relationship with her. And then ultimately she asked if we would be willing to adopt her baby. And so it's near and dear to my heart that adoption, not every environment that somebody finds himself in is a good environment.
Right.
And with 160 babies, 170 babies a day being saved every day, praise God, because of that, we need help. And believers and born-again Christians need to step up and take on exactly what the Word of God says, which is pure and undefiled religion is this, than to help orphans and widows in their time of need. And you might be thinking, well, I can't adopt, or you can support somebody who will.
Yes.
And I always tell people, just go ahead and take it to the Lord. So that's one of the areas in which we have found not only can we minister to the infant and the baby, we can also minister to the mom and the dad. Because they may be going through a difficult time as well, and help them through the Life Recovery Ministry.
You know, we broadcast in about 40 different states, and people in most of those states are going, it's just amazing what's happening in Texas, because in those other states, abortion's still taking place. There are probably some abortions before the 6th week, and there have been one or two individuals that say they're going to break the law after 6 weeks. But you're right, we're saving babies, and this now says, okay, if we are indeed pro-life, we have to step up on the issue of adoption. And I know you're going to be doing some things at Prestonwood, which we might want to then export to the rest of the country, because who knows, this Supreme Court decision coming down might actually put all of the states in a situation like what we have right now in the state of Texas.
Yeah, so November is National Adoption Month.
Yes.
And so November 7th, we're going to highlight the need for individuals to step forward and to begin helping these moms and dads out with their unplanned pregnancy, let's say. All this information, by the way, you might plug it here in just a second, but if anybody ever wanted the information we have, just send me an email at liferecovery@prestonwood.org, liferecovery@prestonwood.org.
And we do have that link right there. You can go to the picture of Michael Perron, and you can see the Life Recovery website. Of course, we also have the interview that they did with you as well. And Brad, I was just thinking, you know, we keep saying about being pro-life and being against the old issue of abortion, but here's the next step if we're really serious about that. Yeah, and they're already thinking proactively about what needs to take place.
It's so important that they have somewhere to go. Mm-hmm. So they save the baby, but it doesn't help if you don't have planned the next second step, third step, fourth step mapped out. But it sounds to me like you guys are on top of that, and that's awesome. Thanks. This is great ministry.
Let me mention again, we do have the match on the table, but I want to come back for just a few more minutes while we have Michael in studio and talk about what it takes to create this life recovery format. I mean, some churches might be small and that's just the pastor, but I know a lot of listeners are in churches a little bit larger, and they might say, maybe we need to go and do this very thing you did, and rather than reinventing the wheel, they can learn from you, can't they?
Absolutely. As I mentioned before, all the resources that we have, let us do the legwork for you. We're 3 years into this, and so we have a little bit of knowledge as to what works and maybe what doesn't work so well. And so I'm happy to share any of that information with anybody who's listening here today.
One of the things I loved about the River Conference is one of the speakers there was Daniel Amen. Of course, when we had Daniel Amina on, they point out that sometimes even the issue of suicide is both a hardware problem and a software problem. It's a hardware problem because, especially at the Amen Clinic, they have actually done more brain scans than anybody on the planet. And they also did brain scans of 300 people who tried to commit suicide, and noticed those brains were very different. First of all, head trauma. You know, we've seen about these NFL athletes that eventually then go and commit suicide, and we recognize that that's a danger signal. And so that's all part of the, if you will, the hardware. People know computers enough now to know the difference between hardware. And then the software is all the negative talk and all of the issues involved in kind of a downward death spiral. And so it seems to me that, Michael, what I hear you doing is having kind of a holistic idea. Sometimes there are solutions medically and pharmacologically that can address the hardware issues. Sometimes there are things that require counseling and directed counseling in terms of the software. And Christians sometimes go to one extreme or the other, and I think it's a both and, isn't it?
It is a both and. You know, God has given gifts to men. And some of those gifts come in the form of doctors who are equipped to help individuals, and that's what they do. That's their profession. In addition to that, some have given the pharmacological element as well to help rewire that brain and the hardware, as you're talking about. But what we try to do is fill up the gap between maybe your hour with a therapist and your hour with a doctor and the other 160 some odd hours during the week. And that's where the church comes in. And that's why we have the groups that we have. That's why we have the relationships building that we have through our church, so that individuals aren't just left wondering, what do I do with the rest of my time?
And so, again, those are some really significant challenges that we need to address, and those are the issues that we really want to kind of address here on Point of View. So if people wanted to get started, are there some obvious first steps in terms of what you could actually do to establish a life recovery at your church?
The first step is to talk to the pastor and maybe share your personal story. I realize that 1 in 4 people have battled some form of addiction. 1 in 3 people are going through a mental health crisis now after the pandemic. Maybe go to your pastor and say, Pastor, do we have anything going on here? And if the answer comes back in a form that you don't care for, say, listen, I might be willing to try to start something. And it starts real small. Just forming a group on an evening in which you destigmatize, you remove the stigma of mental health and addiction, because as we pointed out in the last part of our segment, so much of this has always been, just don't talk about it and it'll go away. But that's not the case, as we are very much aware now with all the studies and all the neurotechnology that we have. It doesn't go away. And talk to somebody is the first step.
And sometimes it helps with somebody who's very prominent to talk about that. Sheila Walsh has sat in that chair before. On one of her books, It's Okay to Not Be Okay, and talks about the fact that, I have a pill, but I also trust in the Lord. And so there is a sense in which we need that, because we've seen a lot of high-profile individuals, whether it's Robin Williams or Kate Spade or a variety of other topics that and individuals that have actually taken their lives, and whether it's that or whether it's addiction or a variety of others, they're just a real opportunity to model that. And that's one of the things I'm so excited about in terms of life recovery. So thank you for being part of this. And one last time, what would you say to our listeners that are considering whether or not to support this ministry?
Well, again, I don't know any other radio show that you could turn to right now and hear this topic talked about in such a way that the truth has been mentioned and the reality of this thing is taking place, that we're not coming in and just trying to throw something at it, but no, we're coming at it with the truth of God's word and solutions. And so, Kerby, thank you for everything that you do to help those in this community.
Brad, we do have at least an opportunity for people to get their particular pledge right now doubled, and that's pretty significant.
I like deals, okay? I just really like deals. And this is a great deal right now. We want to say thanks to those who made that $2,000 gift possible, but we don't get to put it in our total, Kerby, until it's been matched dollar for dollar. So that means you give them a $10 single gift, it becomes $20. You give $50 a month, it becomes $100 a month. Listen to the significance. Those monthly gifts are doubled for the whole year. So that is awesome. 800-347-5151. You can also go to pointofview.net, pointofview.net. But that toll-free number again, 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. 51.
You know, I was just thinking, when you actually join with us, we send you, of course, the Outlook magazine. I'm just looking at this article here. It has resources from Focus on the Family. Here's some resources from the Resolution Movement, which is part of Josh McDowell. They have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. If you look at the books on drug abuse, we have some of the best books we've ever been able to find, some of the best interviews in some of these booklets. These are resources we put in your hand. Even if you're not dealing with it, you know somebody that is. And that is one of the reasons why we want to connect you up with Michael Perron, and maybe even have your own church do what they've been doing there at Prestonwood Baptist Church. But we can only do that if you help us bring these programs to you every single day. And we have been kind of behind in terms of the involvement. As a matter of fact, in just a minute, we're going to get Warren Kelly to tell you where we are, but we certainly do need to hear from you. There's lots of space for you to join with us. And again, a match is on the table, dollar for dollar match. So again, that number is 800-347-5151. Of course, the website is pointofview.net. A dollar for dollar match. We're listener supported, and we'll be right back.
Point of View Truth Team, unchanging truth in a changing world.
As a salesman traveling in South Florida in my car a lot of time, and as a new Christian, I was always being discipled by Christian stations. One time I came upon Point of View with Marlon Maddox, and that program was tremendous influence in my life. I was discipled tremendously. And then through various factors, I lost track of the program, changes of radio station down in South Florida, until recently, out of curiosity, I wondered if the Point of View program, whatever happened to it, until I researched it and found out that it was still on. So I'm tuning in. I'm listening to Point of View now. It's brought back a flood of memories, and it continues great with Kerby Anderson, and it's a tremendous program, and I'm highly encouraged by it. I encourage everyone to listen to it.
Yes, we're still on 49 years later, started 1972, and again, it is still taking place. Brad Fisk with us, as well as Warren Kelly, and I thought somewhere along the line we might also let people know that we're looking ahead. We not only are looking behind at all the things that have happened in the past, we recognize we've got some elections coming up here. And you and I, Brad, have been talking about that off air. So I thought I'd just mention that next year in November, you're going to have 33 U.S. Senate races, 435 races for the House of Representatives. And, of course, a lot of these are going to be completely redistricted. And then, of course, you have the various state legislatures. And when you add up all of those races that will take place in November of 2022, and, of course, primaries that take many months earlier, that almost is 30,000 different elections. So we're going to be providing some information about that, because a lot of people are going to say, who do I vote for? Which district am I in? How do I find all these things out? And that's exactly what we have put on the past on our website, and we'll do that in the future.
It is, and a lot of people are thinking, now, wait a minute, you're getting started a little early. No, we're not. Not at all. There is already all kinds of mechanisms in place throughout our culture trying to, keep the house or get or take it over, or whatever. But you know what? It takes funding to do what we're doing, and we've got a huge job coming up ahead. And Warren, talk to us about how we're doing so far and what needs to be done to be fully funded.
We've got a little ways to go. We have seen a little surge here today. Thank you for those of you who have given today in response to the match. And let me announce that we have met the match.
All right.
We're encouraged for that. But we, for the week, are down by about a third, by about 34%. So we're that much behind where we should be or where we were this time last year. So we really do need to hear from you. We do need your support. Kerby mentioned that we do put out the voter guides. We try to give a lot of resources to our people to help them. We're not backing a party or any particular candidate, but we're showing you where their values sit. So whatever your candidate is you're trying to support or want to know about, we're going to give you the information about how they're going to look at things from a biblical perspective.
And that's one of the things that, back to, are we too early? No, we're right into that, because a lot of the decisions are made in the primary season.
Right.
And if you don't like who you have to choose in November, you have to go back to look at the primaries. And so we are starting to already identify key candidates, key races that can turn some of this around. Just the other day, I was with a doctor, and of all things, a doctor, he's talking about my health, which, by the way, is very good. But at the same time, he said, I can't wait till 2022. And I knew what he meant. He's been very concerned about some of the things happening in this country. So again, we're going to encourage you as much as possible to support us. And this is what some of our listeners have had to say.
Point of View Truth Team.
Point of View has been a big tool in helping me work through what I believe and understand why I believe it, and given me the ability to argue for it and to defend it.
I am increasingly dismayed at not only the slanted coverage that mainstream media provides, but the lack of coverage. If I hadn't listened to Point of View, I know people who don't even know there's a difference between embryonic stem cells and adult stem cells. And I wouldn't have known if I had not listened to your show. And I give it to you guys, but I'm going to increase that amount because I think you guys are so important.
I want you to think, what would we do if we didn't have Point of View? Give something to Point of View to make sure we don't lose this wonderful voice. And thanks again for what you do.
To protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
I do appreciate Point of View and what you folks are doing. You really are doing a great job to educate and to help Christian folks do a better job to honor Christ in all that we do.
Point of View Truth Team.
Back once again, and if you want to join with us, again, that number 800-347-5151. Of course, pointofview.net. Warren, let me come back to you for just a minute because people have no idea of the amount of work necessary to provide these voter guides. And before we found some organizations that were doing this, I remember the amount of time and effort we had some staff to try to begin to look at each one of these candidates and to then begin to vet them out. And fortunately now, over the years, we've been able to identify some organizations that have done a very good job of doing that. But it's one thing to know who your senator is or your member of Congress, but when you start working down to the state Senate level, the state House level, and those kinds of things, all the way down to, of course, even your county commissioners, we can't obviously provide all of that, but it's a work in progress, but it's important. And back to the point I made, sometimes if you don't like who your choices are in November, well, you need to get involved in the primary season, and right now is the primary season, right?
That's absolutely right. And, you know, Kerby mentioned that there's a lot of those down ballot races it's hard to find information for, and maybe not all the way down the ballot, but in many states, some of the people that we're partnering with are able to get very far down that ballot to give you a lot of information, even on your local elections. So we want to do everything that we can to help provide the information that you need to make good, intelligent choices to pick candidates that will support your values. And it's something that we've worked very hard at for many years, but it is something that we need your help to continue to do.
Well, again, we can complain all day, Brad, but if we can give you information about what a particular piece of legislation is, we are going to be really motivating and mobilizing some people in our Take Action section, which is another aspect of this. I cannot tell you the number of times people said, look, I've sheepishly got to admit, I never contacted my member of Congress, but you made it so easy, almost embarrassed if I don't follow up on that. And the one right now is on H.R. 4, which is, again, an attempt to completely take away some of the rights that we have in terms of voting. But we have some other really important issues coming down the pike very quickly here.
Yeah, and not just contacting the member of Congress. There's been a lot of people that told us that they didn't know how to vote, so they didn't. They weren't sure who to vote for, so they just didn't vote. We have a lot of people that are now voting and voting intelligently and helping to shift the balance in the House and the Senate and other elections across the country. And it's awesome to be able to help them do that.
It is fun to meet some of these individuals that are running for office. And I said, hey, what motivated you to run for office? Well, I was listening to your show. Why'd you ask that question? Yeah, well, I just never even thought about it. And then you made it sound like, hey, maybe I could actually run for office. And I went to candidate school, and it looks like I might actually win.
And for us to keep all of this going, you know what? It takes resources. It takes everybody stepping up and doing their part. And I'm going to give you a way you can get in touch with us and make your pledge of support. It's pointofview.net is the website, pointofview.net. And in there you'll see a way to give, as well as some free gifts, some thank you gifts that we're going to give you. It's all explained there on the website. How about that $50 a month level and the messenger bag or the leather laptop bag? Oh, really cool.
Yeah.
So here's the number, 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. Again, pointofview.net, pointofview.net. Thank you, Mr. Kelly, for coming in.
Yes, and I'm going to bring him in next hour, and I hope he won't be coming in saying we're still 34% behind. So maybe that will be good. Next hour, we do have Greg Koukl. We're going to be talking about apologetics and how to defend the Christian faith, but we need to hear from you, and this is a perfect time to call, 800-347-5151. I see my daughter on the line, but there are probably some other calls ready to go. Pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
These days, it's hard to keep up with what we're allowed to say. No matter where you turn, someone is getting canceled for saying the wrong thing. Where did this cancel culture come from? Our society stepped away from God's truth, and that's why every day people try to cobble together some new moral code to live by. Because these moral codes that we invent change all the time, it's a lot to keep up with. Thankfully, we don't have to worry about what might be considered moral tomorrow because we know that God's moral code does not change. Imagine how much peace our society could experience if people stopped trying to invent new moral codes and simply trusted the author of truth. You can help make that a reality by supporting Point of View, where we always point listeners to God's unchanging truth. When you join our truth team, you provide practical resources to equip listeners to help them live out God's truth in their daily life. Join today at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, let me just mention that as you go to the website, you're going to see a number of articles, really good back and forth between Senator Ted Cruz and Senator Richard Blumenthal about voter participation and voter ID. Gets into some of the conversation we've had here before. Also, a very interesting piece we've posted. I call it John Kerry, China, and Climate Change, in which John Kerry doesn't want to do anything to criticize China because he wants China to help with climate change. You'll think? Even yesterday, I talked about the commentary that I posted, pointing out that if you look at the top 25 cities that are emitting more than half of the greenhouse gases in the world, 23 of those 25 are in China. The other one is Moscow and Tokyo. So you can begin to see that China is the big issue, but we don't want to criticize their human rights abuses or anything like that. So that one you want to see. And then, of course, we've been following what's happened in the border. We'll talk more about that tomorrow because we have Colonel Alan West with us for a little bit by phone. Border Czar was set up to fail, in which the author was pointing out that Kamala Harris was given this job almost with the idea that, well, she'll probably not do very well, and that will work in favor of Joe Biden. And so some of the internal politics that we occasionally mention are in those articles. And as you go to the website, you're going to know something else. If you click on my commentary, you will see a really strange picture because it has a cow, has some shells, it has some dollar bills, and it has a Krugerrand. And you're going, what is that all about? Well, what that is actually is a preview of my booklet on money, which I point out the fact that money should be scarce. And I talk about these ray stones that were used in Yap Island, which were used as money until one individual, David O'Keefe, was shipwrecked on the island and began to realize, using modern technology and transportation, I could actually increase the supply of those stones. And guess what? Though money was worthless after a while because there were so many of those. Another example I use are beads in Africa that were used, or shells that were used in Asia and North America. And in each case, once more shells or beads were added, those particular things lost their value. And so I point out that the money supply, whether stones or beads or shells or dollar bills, really can collapse if you print too many of them. And it brings us back to something we talked about earlier in the week. We want to give you some wisdom because it is important for you, with the resources God has placed in your hand, to make wise decisions. But also this hour, we're going to spend some time talking about how to actually answer the questions that maybe you run into. Greg Koukl will be with us in just a moment. He is the author of this book that came out 10 years ago. The 10th anniversary edition is just out again, called Tactics: a game plan for discussing your Christian convictions. And also he has a piece that just came out about why we think of actually doing apologetics. Knowing how to defend the Christian faith is not only biblical, but very effective. So I think you're really going to enjoy some of the conversation we're going to have this hour with Greg. He, of course, started the organization Stand to Reason, and he has such a delightful way of teaching us how to ask questions because, now for those of you a little bit older, you might remember remember Columbo. Remember Columbo? Now, let me ask you a question here. Let me ask you a question. He actually has what he calls the Columbo tactic about how to ask some questions. And so we're going to learn from him because, after all, when we say the word apologetics, we say, oh, well, I can't do that. But he points out that anybody can ask questions, and by asking pointed questions, sometimes you can actually begin to lead to very good evangelistic opportunities. So we're going to be spending some time with him. But don't forget that we are in studio today with Brad Fisk, and last hour we had a match, which we met, of $2,000, right?
That's correct, and I got some great news. It was so much fun. We've got another $2,000 on the table from some friends in the ministry, and we're so grateful for their gift. But it doesn't go in the total until it's matched dollar for dollar. That's really important to understand. The only way we get that $2,000 is for another $2,000 by you and you and you coming in and letting us know that. So here's the phone number if you want to get in on the match, 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. You also want to go over to pointofview.net, the website, because there we have a little outline of the gifts, the thank you gifts that we're going to give you at certain giving levels. So go over to pointofview.net to get that.
And again, I might just mention a minute ago. Yeah.
Point of View Truth Team.
I really appreciate what you guys do. I love the program, and it's so refreshing to have this type of ministry on the air. And, you know, you pray that others would tune in and really get educated from a spiritual perspective about a biblical worldview. I mean, I really appreciate it.
You guys do an amazing job. You guys always are very encouraging, and no matter what, I just wanted to thank you guys.
I just wanted to commend you for the excellent guests that you've had on your program. I think all Americans need to hear these things, and I hear you say that only 1% of listeners support your program, and I just want to encourage people out there. They need to support your program because our country needs to hear these messages.
I just want to say that I love your show. I listen to it every day because I get off just in time enough to hear it, and just keep up the good work.
Just wanted to know how much I appreciate your program. I've been listening to it for several years, and thank you so much for the positions you take. Keep up the good work.
Point of View Truth Team.
You know, that one listener was saying that I've heard you say that less than 1% support this program. Well, I was looking over this week, and I won't even give you the numbers, but it had a 0.000. It was, you know, a fraction of a percent so far that have given. So all that to say, there's room for you. And if nothing else, I glance over every once in a while because at least we can see some of the people taking the phone call, and I can actually see my daughter, and I don't see her on the phone at the moment, so I want to give her a chance to get another phone call.
Well, I think we can do that at 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. How quick can we get this match challenge cared for? We got the phones. We have the website. We're just missing you to check in with us. 800-347-5151. Wouldn't
it be fun to actually have all the phones ringing? Because I walked up and down the hallway. I saw my wife got one, and I saw a few other people were catching one, but I've never seen where all the phones are ringing simultaneously, and that would be kind of fun.
It would be kind of fun, and it would actually be very strategic. Talk about tactics.
Yes.
Okay, we're right in the middle of our Truth Team week, and we're listener-supported, guys. And we need your help. We're not ashamed or afraid of mentioning that because we are listener-supported Christian radio. Listener, that's you. Supported, that's you calling us at 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. You can also get us at pointofview.net, pointofview.net.
Might just mention, we come back with Greg Koukl. We'll be talking, of course, about his book, Tactics, because that has been a bestseller for 10 years. But another book I certainly recommend is Relativism, Feet Firmly Planted in Midair. Again, so is his sense of humor. And, of course, these are not only books, but DVDs. And so we want to equip you to be able to answer questions about, well, you have your view of truth and I have my view of truth, or you have your set of ethics and I have my set of ethics. How do we respond to that? And how do we respond to people saying, well, I don't believe the Bible because it's full of errors? We are going to educate you, as we always do. But in order to do that, of course, we just need to hear from a few more of you so we can meet this match. Again, that number, 800-347-5151. Of course, the website is pointofview.net. As I've mentioned before, when you go there, you can see what some of the benefits of becoming a Truth Team member. And I would encourage you to click on that banner banner that says Unchanging Truth. 800-347-5151. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Each day we use some form of money, but rarely we think about the key attributes of money that make it work in our daily financial transactions. In my booklet on a biblical view of money, I explain that scarcity is one of the most important aspects of money as a medium of exchange. We can see this by looking at other forms of money used in the past. Money originally took the form of stones, beads, and shells. Cattle and agricultural produce might have been seen as forms of money, but they would only work on a barter system and could not be divided or stored the way money can be used. The ray stones in Yap Island were large circular stones carved from limestone. They were brought from the neighboring island and difficult to procure. That changed when David O'Keefe was shipwrecked on the island. He realized that he could go to another island and using modern tools and transportation could increase his supply of the stones. This ultimately led to the demise of these stones as money. In Western Africa, special beads were used as money for centuries. They were precious because glass-making technology was expensive and not very common. Their limited supply made the beads sound money until European explorers visited the region. Once they began to import vast quantities of glass beads from Europe, the value of this form of money collapsed. Seashells were another form of money around the world. They also suffered the same fate when advanced technology and boats flooded the market. There's a lesson here for us today. The money supply in America has been increased by more than a third in just the last year or two. The dollars in your wallet or purse are worth less than a year ago and will be worth even less in the future. This is the unfortunate lesson of the history of money. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Critical Race Theory, go to viewpoints.info/CRT. Point of View Truth Team, unchanging truth in a changing world.
I remember back the first time I heard Point of View. I was in law school, and I turned on a radio show, and it was at night, and I got to where I wanted to listen to that every night because, you know, it was something that really touched my heart, which is taking biblical truths and applying them to the very issues of today, which is exactly, I think, what Christianity is all about. And Marlon was doing it, and really no one else was. And it's still that way. It not only attracted me because it was doing this special thing, but it was just so encouraging to hear someone not shirk away from speaking the truth. And I think all Christians need that. They need to hear that it's okay to be bold, loving, but bold with what is true and what is right. And that's what Point of View does, is it doesn't say, oh, well, that's the truth, but we better whisper that, and then we better go hide somewhere. Instead, Point of View says, this is the truth, and we've got to stand on the truth. And I think that encourages everyone else to stand on the truth in their own community and to make a difference. So it educates, but I think it emboldens and encourages at the same time.
Talking about standing for truth from Kelly Shackelford. Of course, the theme this week is unchanging truth, God's unchanging truth in a changing world and culture. We now come to our good friend Greg Koukl, founded Stand to Reason back in 1993, spoken on about 70 college and university campuses, have been doing his radio show for 27 years. We've talked with him about a number of his books. Tactics, which I have in front of me here, the 10th anniversary edition. We'll probably get to that in just a minute. The Story of Reality, Relativism, Feet Firmly Planted in Midair. I mentioned just that a minute ago. And Greg Koukl, it is always great to have you on the program.
Oh, man, Kirby, I tell you, you guys are doing such fabulous work there at Point of View. And, I mean, just kind of being in the stream with you, fighting this battle on a daily basis, which is getting more intense every single day. I mean, just in the last few days, some things I discovered just bowled me over. And that's why it is so vital that you have your program, that I do what I do at Stand to Reason. You and I are able to talk on the air, whether on your show or on my show, whatever. I am just absolutely thrilled for your presence with Point of View and the contribution you guys are making to helping the body of Christ face up to all of these challenges.
I just mentioned he's an adjunct professor of Christian apologetics at Biola. Of course, he has a master's degree in philosophy and religion from Talbot School of Theology, a master's in Christian apologetics from Simon Greenleaf, and, of course, the book Tactics. And I was going to start with Tactics until I got the email from Greg Koukl this morning, the toughest critic you'll ever face. And you say a few years back, J. Warner Wallace and I, by the way, we just did an interview a few months ago with J. Warner Wallace before the book came out. We replayed it again on A Person of Interest. What a great book. But anyway, you said you had to follow J. Warner Wallace, which is not an easy task, in which you made 4 quick points. And I loved the way you did it. You know, other than the fact that the Bible commands it, other than Jesus and his apostles did it, other than the apologetics work, and it really was a great illustration of what we've talked with you about for many years. And that is, when you hear the word apologetics, we think, well, that's for somebody as smart as Greg Koukl, but I can't do it. But you've reminded us that, first of all, it's biblically commanded, and second of all, anybody can ask questions, can't they?
Oh, that's right. And this is, of course, what the book Tactics is meant to do, a game plan for discussing your Christian convictions, is to give tools for the rank-and-file believer to kind of, as I put it, get into the shallow end of the pool and engage using questions, kind of in Columbo fashion, if some of your listeners remember that magnificent TV show that just hit its 50th anniversary last week or so, using questions in a casual way to create conversations and to get people thinking about their own views and to get them thinking about Jesus, because I'm convinced, as you are, Kirby, that Jesus is worth thinking about. And as that little piece you mentioned that came in the email today, I actually read it this morning because I get my own stuff, coming from our team, so I know what the flow of information is coming out of Stand to Reason. But other than those reasons that I cite there, it's having the ability to know some of the solid reasons why our convictions are actually true. And that word truth is very malleable today, so let me put it this way. When I say true in that sense, I mean true like gravity is true, true to the way the world really is. The fact is that every Christian goes through some period of doubt. I don't care how long you've been a Christian, how much you know, the challenges of the world and of life stir you up in hard ways, and even John the Baptist was scratching his head when he was in prison, right? And so this is the hardest critic that we're ever going to face, and that's going to be ourselves when we're down and out, when we don't feel the Holy Spirit, when circumstances are rough and against us. I know in my case, Kerb, when I go back, when I have those times, I just go back to the foundation, to the basic reasons why I'm absolutely convinced that God exists, that he's spoken through the Scripture, that Jesus rose from the dead, all of that foundational stuff. And that puts me back on track no matter what my feelings happen to be in the moment.
First of all, let me just say that even though we are are encouraging you to support this ministry, we also encourage you to find out what you can of Stand to Reason. It's str.org. We have a link there. And for those of you that have followed my admonition in the past, because I think Greg Koukl is just a must-read, you probably received an email, and when I got it, Greg, it said, the toughest critic you'll ever face. So I'm reading page 1, reading page 2. It isn't until I get to page 3 I realize, oh, I'm the toughest critic you'll ever have. And so just some great material that is there. But also we have a link to the 10th anniversary edition. And I was shocked. Zondervan has treated you very well because they have made this paperback very inexpensive. And again, it's just some book that you need to have on your shelf. I've got, of course, multiple editions, if you will, of Tactics all the way back to the original one. But this one here is one that I've enjoyed because you've added some new material. Right. And that is really helpful as well, because as much as you do hearken back to, and their whole chapters on Columbo Step 1, Columbo Step 2, Columbo Step 3, there's all sorts of new things that we need to understand in this postmodern culture where you can redefine words anywhere you want.
Yeah, that's right. And you know more than anybody, Kerby, that, and this is what I tell folks now when I teach on this, maybe 5 years ago, I talked about there being a full court press from the culture on every single thing that is vital to Christianity, whether it's the existence of Christ, whether it's the person of Christ, whether it's the work of the cross, whether it's the existence of God or the reality of the resurrection, or all these other things that are coming in. Everywhere we're being pounded. What I didn't realize was that in the last 5 years, there was a whole new bunch of stuff that's come up and overwhelmed all of those other things, like critical race theory, which Josh McDowell got in a lot of trouble for saying this is the number one challenge that we're facing in Christianity in the world right now, because it's a hostile worldview and it's coming on like a tsunami from every direction. So that means programs like Point of View, organizations like Stand to Reason, and our other colleagues who are doing other things, and we've got lots of them that are involved that we draw from. And your own work in pro ministry over the years and stuff, how vital this is right now for, as I say now, for Christians to stand firm against the lies of the world and also the lies of the wolves. The world is on the outside, but now you know the wolves are on the inside, man. They're not at the gates anymore. They are inside our circles, and many of them look like us, but what they're feeding us is poison. And this is why Point of View, Stand to Reason, organizations like ours, efforts like ours, are so vital right now.
Let's take a break. When we come back, maybe we'll talk a little bit more about why that's essential. But, Brad, we do have a match on the table. It is a $2,000 dollar-for-dollar match challenge, and we don't get any of that money until it's matched dollar for dollar. So if you gave $50 a month, it becomes $100 a month. It's especially strategic for monthly gifts because we get to count the whole year. $2,000 dollar for dollar match, 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. You can also give at pointofview.net, and you can see the thank you gifts we have there as well at pointofview.net. We'll come back and continue our conversation with Greg Koukl, because you've heard us talk about critical theory and critical race theory and what that means. Also, this idea of postmodernism, relativism, and some of these isms that all are challenges to the Christian faith. And as he points out, they're not just outside the doors of the church, they've come inside as well. So we're going to talk about that in some detail, maybe get some comments from him about what we can do moving forward. But we are coming to a break, and this is a perfect time, if you don't want to miss any of the conversation with Greg Koukl, to give us a call. 800-347-5151. We've got some people waiting for the phones to ring, so let's have them ring. 800-347-5151. Of course, you anytime can go to the website at pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
These days, it's hard to keep up with what we're allowed to say. No matter where you turn, someone is getting canceled for saying the wrong thing. Where did this cancel culture come from? Our society stepped away from God's truth, And that's why every day people try to cobble together some new moral code to live by. Because these moral codes that we invent change all the time, it's a lot to keep up with. Thankfully, we don't have to worry about what might be considered moral tomorrow because we know that God's moral code does not change. Imagine how much peace our society could experience if people stopped trying to invent new moral codes and simply trusted the author of truth. You can help make that a reality by supporting Point of View, where we always point listeners to God's unchanging truth. When you join our truth team, you provide practical resources to equip listeners to help them live out God's truth in their daily life. Join today at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net. and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, we'll get to Greg Koukl in just a minute. Again, Stand to Reason. We have information about that on our website, but Brad Fisk in studio.
Okay, quick update on our match challenge. Started at $2,000, top of the hour. We're down to $800 left to go, and it'll all be matched. I don't know about you. I don't want to leave any of that money on the table because it does not go into our total until our listeners pledge part of that, and whatever they pledge, that's how much will go into the total, especially those monthly gifts. That $50 a month becomes $100 a month for a year. So that's the kind of way we can multiply our gift. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. The match is on. Please give us a call.
Greg Koukl with us, President Stand to Reason. And Greg, I'm holding up right now a couple of booklets that we have made available in the past on racism and even on critical race theory. And you mentioned that in passing, and that might be worth delving into for a little bit, because critical theory, and especially critical race theory, is presented as a true view of the world, kind of from a Marxist kind of idea, but it also insulates itself from any kind of criticism because it says, well, any counter argument you might come up with actually just shows that you're supporting systemic racism. So there are some big issues, and that's one of the reasons why I'm thrilled that you or Josh McDowell or even those of us at Point of View, and we've talked with Doug Groteis and others, are providing some answers to what has become, as you said, an issue that's just not outside the church, but becoming inside the church as well. Can you tell us more?
What you just mentioned, by the way, is called a Kafka trap, and it might be good to mention this to people. Kafka. That's Franz Kafka, the Czech existentialist who wrote a book, I think it was called The Trial. And basically, in that book, any attempt that the defendant made to defend himself against false charges was taken as evidence of his guilt. And this is exactly what you see in this circumstance. They talk about dialogue, okay? There's no dialogue in this thing. If you try to dialogue and demonstrate that their assessment of you or of the entire circumstance is mistaken, then they take that as evidence that they're right. And every single time you offer something in a certain sense in your defense or against the general idea of critical race theory, they take that as evidence that you're right. So that's the Kafka trap. So it's good for people to know that that's a trick. And the way to deal with the Kafka trap is to use it in reverse. So if somebody made that claim to me, oh, you're saying that you're not a racist, that's your white fragility, it just proves that you are. I said, you know what, I knew you were going to say that, and I'm glad that you did. Why? Because that proves that you're mistaken.
And you've got so many good ones in here.
What do you mean? That's good. It's blah, blah, blah. They say something. No, there you go. You just did it again. Your challenge to me is evidence that you're mistaken. You always say things like that when you have no evidence for your case, and now you're doing it again, and you just play it back at them. Of course, it's nonsense against nonsense, because this is an issue that is very important for many reasons. It's morally weighty in itself, the question of racism, but the way that critical theory construes this whole issue, and this, you're right, it comes out of Marxism, is an attempt to remake society on a totally different basis than what we have. And as a result, and here's just a couple of things that people can keep in mind, because there's complexity here, Kerby, as you know, and I'm glad you've written a piece on this and you're distributing it. But on my view, this consistently bears false witness against our neighbor. To call a person racist because he's white is not only a return to racial essentialism. I mean, that would be the doctrine of the Imperial Japanese in the Third Reich, in the 20th century, that some races are superior and other races are inferior. In this case, it's the white people who are wicked. But it's also a bearing false witness, which, last time I looked, that's still a sin. And the reason is the charge of racism against a white person is based simply on the person's skin color, and that makes a member of a group that is oppressive, and not based on anything in their behavior or in their attitudes, which is what people should be assessed by, and not by their skin color. We have this CRT has flip-flopped race relations back to the way they were with Jim Crow laws. All right, this has been the worst thing for race relations. And by the way, who can't see that? All the controversy, all the hostility, all the pitting of one person against another person, calling them names, calling them oppressors without adequate justification. All this does is tear up our culture and destroy genuine conversation on critical matters.
One of the things you do in tactics is help us understand sometimes how to ask a question, how to respond. And you just, of course, took us to Kafka himself in that regard. But another one that we always appreciate from you is suicide, views that self-destruct. You have run into so many examples on the various campuses you've been on in which individuals make these statements. And if you don't challenge them, they sound pretty reasonable until you point out that they are self-defeating statements. Help us out with that.
Well, I mean, I was just thinking of one the other day when people said, well, you shouldn't be shooting people, should this, should that, should the other thing. You're passing judgment on them. You're forcing your moral view on them. And my question then is, should I take that advice? Yes, of course. I said, well, why should I take your advice when you don't even take your advice?
Yes.
What do you mean? Well, you just said, I should not should people, and I should take your advice. So now I'm confused. What am I supposed to believe from what you just said? Now, there's a series of questions that are meant to expose the suicidal tendencies of that point of view. But when I said the initial statements, I bet you a lot of your listeners had no idea what was wrong with them. You shouldn't be shooting people, Don't be telling people what to do. Well, are you telling me what to do? One of those kinds of things. So we are able to recognize the suicidal tendencies, and then in classic Columbo fashion, we try to use a question to exploit that. Incidentally, I'm working on a new book now that deals just with that. What questions do we use to exploit particular liabilities and challenges against Christianity, whether it's atheism or whether it's the problem of evil or whether it's evolution or whether it's abortion. So I'm hopefully it'll be out next fall, but it's called Street Smarts. Just giving you an advance notice of that, Kerb.
And we'll put you on for sure. Just before we run out of time, I wanted to see if you would like to maybe challenge our listeners today to support this ministry because, of course, you have an open invitation anytime, whether it's Tactics or Street Smarts or any other book. But again, what would you say to any listener thinking, well, should I support this ministry or not?
Well, I think the listeners should ask themselves the question, what would happen if Kerby and POV and your whole enterprise just disappeared? Because that's what happens when there's not financial funding, that the groups that need the financial funding just disappear. What would happen? And your listeners are going to say, well, I listen to this show every day. I listen to it all the time. I've learned so much of it. And sometimes the change doesn't fall into the meter that the worker is worthy of his wages. That without supporting an enterprise like Point of View, there will be no enterprise like Point of View. And Point of View is more important, more vital nowadays, today, September 23rd. I mean, right now with what's happening, than it ever has been, I guarantee you, Kerby, in all the years you've been doing this. This is a critical time for our culture and Christians in it. And we are more and more in the crossfires of the culture, and we need the kinds of things that Point of View offers consistently to be able to stand true to Christ and to our convictions.
And we also need, of course, Stand to Reason. We have links to that, and also, again, very inexpensive version that you can get of Tactics, and it's something that is a must-read. So, Greg, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
All the best, Kerby. Keep up the good work.
Brad, just before we take a break, I think we still have a match on the table.
We do. We have remaining last report of $800 to go, and that entire $2,000 will be matched. And we have to have it done before the end of the program. So give us a call right now at 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. 5151, and they can go to the website as well.
And again, I was just struck by the urgency of Greg Koukl.
Yeah.
But again, as you go to the website, you can, of course, find out a little bit more about the various giving levels, the benefit of actually becoming part of the Truth Team, because we do send you some thank you gifts. So it's pointofview.net. And, of course, the number 800-347-5151. I see one person on a phone, but I suspect there's some other phones that are waiting to be rung.
Probably is, and we do not want to see Point of View disappear. As he said just a moment ago, no, not going to happen, Lord willing. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Let's get the match cleared up.
I would think so. Gotta love a guy, street smarts and tactics. Those are pretty good. Looking forward to the next book. But again, phone call, 800-347-5151, pointofview.net. We'll bring Warren Kelly in to give us an update right after this.
Point of View Truth Team, unchanging truth in a changing world.
Because I want to further this ministry. I don't watch the news on television a lot because it's biased, I think, and depressing. But I do listen to Point of View because the subjects are always current, and then give a biblical view of what's going on. And I just feel really blessed and really informed when I listen to your show.
You know, one of the things that people say is I don't even sometimes watch the news because I don't know what I'm going to get. And we try to cover this because, again, we're talking about truth here and Truth Team. And a good example of that is the editors of the National Review have said that one of the things that have been used over the last couple of days, and you see this on television, you see it on internet and all the rest, is the reason we had so many people from Haiti crossing the Rio Grande and actually then camping out at Del Rio was due to bad information. I love the editors here saying, no, actually it was good information. It was the presumption that if you could make it across the river, you would actually be allowed to stay. And of course, you see that then earlier this week, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, went down to Del Rio and said, no, the border is closed. And everybody's going, no, it's not, because we're watching people walking across the Rio Grande River. Thousands, the best estimate now, anywhere from 15,000 to 20,000 there. The numbers are starting to wane a little bit for a couple of reasons. First of all, some of those individuals have just left. They actually have not even checked in with the authorities. Of course, some of them were flown home, and they're now saying that some of the flights have frightened some of the migrants to go back to Mexico. And the Mexican authorities, which were looking the other way, are saying, maybe now we need to move them further south to Mexico. But still, even though you're going to be hearing over the next couple of days that everything is fine now in Del Rio, their estimated 600,000 migrants have been released into the United States, some of which have notices to appear, but thousands, maybe they figure hundreds of thousands, are what are called gotaways. And so we'll be talking about some of that tomorrow with Colonel Alan West. He's been down there, and he can give us some perspective in that regard. And the second hour, we'll also have Lathan Watts. Maybe we'll get his perspective on this court case that the College of Ozarks, through Alliance Defending Freedom, is doing because of the attempt by the Biden administration to force private Christian schools to violate their beliefs. So those are some topics we'll be addressing tomorrow, but it's just a good example of why, if nothing else, we want you to listen to Point of View. We want to tell you the truth, even when sometimes that truth is unpleasant. And just before we run out of time, Brad, we've got a match on the table. Don't know how we've been doing here.
Well, guess what? We're up and over the top. We made it, and we want to celebrate. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your gifts to make that possible. All that $2,000 match is now in our total. And the president of Point of View, Warren Kelly, is sitting here next to me, and you've got a report.
I do. We mentioned that coming out of yesterday, we were about 34% below where we were last year this time during our week, and we've made a little bit of progress on that, but not a lot. We've had a lot of gifts come in, and we're very thankful for each and every one of those. But what we've noticed is there very few people are deciding to join the Truth Team with a monthly gift. And so we really need to hear, especially from those of you that are able to give monthly. As Kerby has said many times, the bills come in monthly. So when the money comes in monthly, it matches up much better, makes my life a whole lot easier.
Point of View Truth Team.
And I've been listening to Point of View for about 12 years now. It's just been such an impact on me because in high school, when I first became aware of the political spectrum and all that, and then the culture wars going on, I was a conservative ideologue, basically, going with whatever conservatives said. But after listening to the show over the years, I've realized that I'm supposed to be for truth. I'm supposed to be a Christian and then a conservative. And I'm supposed to look at all this that's going on around us in today's culture through a biblical lens. And I can't thank y'all enough for that.
I'm so glad to have the Kingdom Keys Network that presents Point of View program and replays it by recording at night so I can catch up on what I miss. It is the highlight of my day. I don't have Wi-Fi or cable news access, so radio is almost my sole means of reception of news. And Point of View helps me understand the political landscape and apply Christian values to it. I'm so honored to be able to give to Point of View. It is a most worthy Christian outreach. We need their informed voice to speak to the issues we face each day.
Without programs like Point of View, Ministries and Works would not have a forum that reaches the populations that need to hear the truth about the very important issues that America is founded on. So often we take what we hear for granted, the radio program or the wonderful personalities, but they can only be on if people like you and me support them.
Point of View Truth Team.
Back once again, Warren, you and I have traveled quite a bit to a number of places for radio stations and all the rest. And when we talk to a lot of our donors, it is amazing how many of them say, I just listen to Point of View. I don't even listen to the mainstream media anymore.
That's very true. And I talked to one of our listeners in Alaska just a few minutes ago, and she listens every day, the entire program. Very dedicated listeners. We've heard that from a number of people, and it makes a difference in their lives. And we need you to help us to make that happen.
You mentioned that people are not giving monthly. Let me run through the thank you gifts. At $30 a month, that's $360 for the year. We're going to make sure you get the Outlook magazine that comes out every month. And also, if you get to the $50 a month level, which is $600 for the year, you'll get the Outlook magazine and the monthly booklet that Kerby talks about all the time, which is awesome. And plus, you're going to get your choice of a canvas messenger bag or a leather laptop bag. There's pictures of them on the website, and they are so cool. They're so handy and convenient. And then there's a $100 a month level, $1,200 for the year. All of the above I just said, plus Kerby's 5 most important books of the year, and it's a mystery to many of us as what those are, so you'll have to just give it that level and you'll find out what those 5 books are. And you can do that right now at 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. You can also give, of course, and find out more about the gifts at pointofview.net, pointofview.net.
And let me just encourage you one more time. Your gift really does make a difference. When you give, you will change lives, the lives of people all across the country. Point of View reaches millions of people across our nation, and you're a part of that. You're helping to shape the lives of people across the nation, and those lives go on to shape our country. You've heard the stories about the many people that have done great things, many of them on a much smaller scale, but the people who listen to this program are better educated, they're better informed, they have a biblical perspective on the issues that are facing our nation, and they're able to get involved and to make a difference for the future of our nation. If you're concerned about where our country is going, one of the best things that you can do is to invest in the future of our nation, and you do that right here with Point of View.
Hey, we're about 30% short of where we need to be in our budget and our fundraising, so we're asking you to prayerfully consider giving this afternoon. The phones will be open, or even tomorrow. Please give us a call with your very best gift at 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. And, of course, pointofview.net.
So, again, we encourage your response. As we just pointed out, we are behind, so we'll see what we can do. And even though we're going off the air in about 30 seconds, that's still an opportunity for you to make that phone call. As a matter of fact, I see some people on the phones, but I'm sure there's some empty phones, and so take the time to give us a call. And, of course, anytime you can also visit the website, pointofview.net. Colonel Alan West, Lathan Watts will be with us tomorrow, looking for that. And, Brad, you'll be with me as well, and we'll see where we end up the week. A real challenge. But again, one more time, that number, 800-347-5151. Also go to the website, pointofview.net. Want to thank Andrew, Steve, as well as Brad and Warren. And we'll see you back here tomorrow on Point of View.
These days, it's hard to keep up with what we're allowed to say. No matter where you turn, someone is getting canceled for saying the wrong thing. Where did this cancel culture come from? Our society stepped away from God's truth, and that's why every day people try to cobble together some new moral code to live by. Because these moral codes that we invent change all the time, it's a lot to keep up with. Thankfully, we don't have to worry about what might be considered moral tomorrow, because we know that God's moral code does not change. Imagine how much peace our society could experience if people stopped trying to invent new moral codes and simply trusted the author of truth. You can help make that a reality by supporting Point of View, where we always point listeners to God's unchanging truth. When you join our truth team, you provide practical resources to equip listeners to help them live out God's truth in their daily life. Join today at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net. and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.